All right, Marina, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Building It Together, What's Shaping the Next CVC Course Design Rubric. My name's Maria Elena Fernandez, and I am the Distance Education and Instructional Design Coordinator at College of the Siskiyous. And I'm a faculty member with CVC at One. It's my pleasure to welcome you today. I'm going to let Sochi introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Xochitl Tirado. I'm the Distance Education Coordinator at Imperial Valley College, and I'm also a faculty mentor with CVC. It's so great to be here with you all.
So during today's webinar, we will share a survey link in the chat near the end of the session. Your feedback is incredibly valuable and helps CVC continue to improve and design programming that better meets the needs of our colleges and systems. We truly appreciate you taking a few minutes to complete the survey. I would also like to extend a special thank you to our ASL interpreters for being here with us today. We deeply appreciate your support in helping make this session accessible and inclusive for all participants. If you need proof of attendance for flex credit or professional advancement, please stay until the end. Complete the survey and request a copy of your responses in the Google form as documentation. For the best webinar experience, we recommend using full screen mode in Zoom. And you can also, as I mentioned earlier, adjust the size of the video or shared screen at any time using the scroll bar on your screen. Thank you again for being here, and we're excited to get started.
Before we go on, I see a few comments on the chat saying that they can only see the person speaking. I know. Mhm.
The interpreter spotlighted.
Let's see. Let me, I know Itzel is working on that right now, but let me
Yes, because I don't.
spotlight for everyone. Okay, and then Jonathan. Um, are you, can you guys tell us if you're able to see me and the interpreters now?
Jonathan, can you turn your camera on just for a moment?
And I see no, and that's because Sochi, you are not
Okay, now
you are
they
not.
say they can only see the interpreter.
Okay, so
I'm
let
gonna.
me see.
Okay, I just spotlighted you, Sochi.
Okay. Did you spotlight yourself too, Marielena?
I'm
That's
doing it right now.
okay.
I
Go
think I
ahead and
just
do
did.
it.
We should be good now, but I don't see
Okay.
a spotlight on Jonathan anymore.
I don't see a spotlight on Jonathan either.
Okay, I'll
At
add it.
spotlight, I see
Uh,
it.
I got it.
You got it? Okay. Okay, so now can you all see the person that is, can you see all four of us?
Yay!
Oh, yay. I see somebody saying thank you. Thank you so much for your patience. All right, excellent. All right, then we will go ahead and get started with this webinar. As I mentioned, my name is Xochitl Tirado, um, and today our presenter was meant to be Liesl Boswell, that you all may know from San Diego Community College District. Unfortunately, Liesl had a last minute emergency and she's not able to be here with us today. She's doing fine, so no need to panic. It just, life happens sometimes. So, however, Liesl did create this slide deck. She did create this presentation, but Marilena and I did meet with her to prepare the presentation. So we are going to go ahead and present for Liesl. This recording will be available on our CVC site. Liesl took the opportunity to also record herself presenting, so we will be sure to also include her recording. So if you want to hear Liesl's beautiful voice and her presentation style, you'll be able to once we upload both of those recordings to our CVC site. All right. So I am going to skip a few slides because if you have ever heard Liesel present, she's very personable and adds, a personal twist to her presentations. So I'm going to skip over a few slides and really get to the meat of our webinar. Oh, but this is a good slide. They're all great slides, but this one's important. If you have any questions, please go ahead and add them to the chat or the Q&A. We will try to answer questions as we go, but if there are questions that are going to be answered later or that need further discussion, we'll save them till the end. So please feel free to give us your questions. All right, these are the few slides that I'm going to go past. She had a little remembering the past and where we've been. But we'll start right here. What else happened in 2020? And Maria Elena, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. So I don't think we all need to go back to 2020 and remember the sort of chaos that ensued from there. But I think it's safe to say that 2020, in some ways, catapulted online learning into a sphere that was sort of beyond where it had been resting comfortably within its boundaries there. So we know also that the CVC rubric was last revised in 2020. And so we were given direction from the Chancellor's office to revise the rubric in order to reflect the changing landscape of online education. So I think it's important to say that last year we did begin this rubric revision process. And throughout this presentation, we'll focus on how the rubric was shaped and provide a general overview of the work before looking at some more specifics. So one of the goals that the Chancellor's office asked of us, and some of this information, we presented this information in various forms throughout the year as we've gone through this work. So some of you may know this, and some of you may be hearing this for the first time, but we're just going to quickly kind of go through this information. So the revised CVC rubric wanted or needed an additional focus on artificial intelligence, regular and substantive interaction, privacy and security, equity, and accessibility. So I think one of the things that we were doing is
Hello, hi, this is the interpreter. If you can slow down just a little bit, I'm having a little trouble keeping up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, just remember to take breaths.
Okay. So our shared goal among the work group that was formed was to sort of intentionally reimagine and realign the rubric to better meet the needs of faculty. And so we worked through an entire redesign. We repackaged the core concepts of course design. The concepts are still there, but they are more succinct and more transparent. And I think it's safe to say that the changes that are coming in the rubric they were necessary, and it's a long time coming. The first of the major goals was to improve the element or to add an element that was specific to AI. And the goal here was to provide, I don't hear an echo, so I think it's just you. Oops. Okay.
If anyone has two devices connected, be sure to mute one.
Yeah, the sound is fine on my end.
Oh, okay. Thank you, different Maria, or actually I would have known. So sorry, I'm reading the chat as they come through. All right. The goal here was to provide opportunities for incorporating these college level AI policies and guidance. So I think it's important to note that the rubric does not tell anyone how to do anything. It simply is asking for confirmation that there are guidelines and policies around the use of AI tools in their online courses. So the rating criteria really focuses on campus and course-specific policies. Okay, next one. RSI, or regular and substantive interaction, sort of shot onto the screen or shot onto the stage with the ACCJC rubric revision. So I think here the goal, if we wanted to think about what is the goal around this, the previous rubric had elements already in there that focused on RSI, but a lot of what needed to happen here was just an update in the language, and to really sort of think about what that looks like, what that might look like. REC to RSI, and embed RSI elements across existing structures within the rubric. Think here, you'll see or you'll find that the standards are strengthened and they're clarified for the instructor-student interaction. And also they will align better with the federal and accreditation guidelines. The next goal is privacy and security. Here, the need was to address the issues around data privacy and cybersecurity, and primarily to promote the student security and safety, and to ensure that our courses maintain the data privacy for our students. Here again, the rating criteria is focused primarily on the campus and course-specific policies. So there's no telling anyone how to do anything, but just ensuring that policies are in place and present and visible somewhere. The next goal was equity. And here, the goal was to center equity in course design so that we support students from all learning, all learning variabilities. We are infusing and amplifying equity principles throughout the rubric. And the goal here was to build on and incorporate the foundational work of the Peralta Equity Rubric. Finally, whenever you begin a major project, a major revision project, it sort of opens doors for other changes, or where you see places that can be improved in other areas. And so some of this work carried over into some of these additional changes that as we were working through this process, what were some of these changes? And one of the major changes, which we'll talk about later, is the need to address accessibility and course design, excuse me, accessibility pre-review, right? So before a formal review. We also definitely wanted to think about RSI and how it looked like in other elements aside from a specific section that is called out. We also wanted to streamline the rubric structure, and some of this came from the great work of the pilot and the feedback that we received from people who were looking at the rubric and using it, and from the work group experiences. So streamlining the rubric structure and rebranding levels for clarity. So incomplete, approaching, aligned, and exceptional. And here the rating language is focused primarily on the student experience. Another change that occurred, which we'll talk about later in this webinar, is the transition to a web-based rubric housed within Canvas. Okay.
Sorry, I was muted. So now I want to take you all on a little journey and tell you how this work. Well, we know how it started through the chancellor's office giving us this directive, but then what did we do with that directive? So um, we wanted to make sure that the revision of the rubric was a collaborative effort. We wanted to make sure that we had voices from across the state. As you all know, we have some great distance education coordinators, instructional designers, um, faculty that, teach online. So we wanted to make sure that we were taking as many voices as possible, but also to do it in a way where we could, really work together as a team. Because as the number is important. You want to have enough voices, but then not too many where it becomes impossible to do this huge task. So here you can see our primary work group on this slide. So these are the people that have been with us on this journey since we started. And I want to think back to when we started. And I think it was spring of 2025 when we first started meeting. It was like January 2025. That's when the first official meeting came. And this work group was composed, making sure that we had all sorts of different people in different positions at different colleges, but that were also representing important groups in our system, like the academic senate, people in DECO. We also wanted to make sure we had administrators in the room, as well as faculty, of course, in the room, so that when we started making changes, the changes actually reflected all of the different things that we think of in our roles in our campus. So I want to give a big shout out to this group because we were meeting, we started meeting every other week for 2 hours. And then we would get one of the goals accomplished, we'd take a break. Marilyn and I would keep working, drafting things that the group had, like the direction they had told us to go in. Then we'd meet again. We're still meeting. Now we're meeting about once a month because we're at the tail end of this really great work that we've done together. So I wanted to give a shout out to this group of people that, have very, very busy personal and professional lives, but really carve out the time to look at and really care about what we're doing. It has been a true pleasure working with everyone. And then here is just an overview of that main work group and where they come from. We wanted to make sure that we had representation from across the state. And I think that, we did that pretty well. So it was just truly a great combination. So that's our primary work group. That work group, we started by looking at our current rubric, looking at the goals that the chancellor gave us, and then talking about what other changes we wanted to make in the rubric. So this work group is truly the work group that has been making the changes in the rubric. Then we also worked with an accessibility group. This accessibility group, I think we've only met with them once. But when we met with them, we had a draft of what we felt, the work group felt, what we felt we should do with accessibility. So we presented that to this accessibility group, took their feedback, and made a lot of revisions on our accessibility focus in the rubric. And again, here I just want to showcase where all of the different people from that accessibility work group came across our state. Um, and again, these were people that work fully in accessibility in our colleges, others that are just known for their accessibility expertise. And then we also had instructional designers, faculty that teach online. Again, we wanted to make sure we really got feedback from a wide variety of folks that do different things in our system. And then finally, we did have a rubric pilot group. This group was made up of reviewers, our current online reviewers that have been POCR trained. We reached out to them, asked who's interested in, putting our first draft rubric to a test and giving us feedback. So this was a larger group, as you can see here by this map. And what we had them do is we gave them the first draft of the rubric. We gave them a course to review. And what we told them is we're not so interested about if the course is aligned or not aligned. We're more interested in, does this rubric language make sense? So we asked them a few questions as they were reviewing the course. And with that feedback, we took it and made revisions in that initial draft of the rubric. So this rubric pilot group did a great deal of work, because if you've reviewed a course in the past, you know how much work that is. But then they had to provide us a ton of feedback in each of the elements. And we truly took that feedback and made a lot of changes in that initial rubric draft. So again, shout out to that rubric pilot group that made themselves available to us and really did the work. And I remember it was the month of October. We gave them 1 month to take that initial rubric, take the course, and give us feedback.
And I think just let me add that there was one group focused on a POCR certified course, and one that was a brand new course that had not been aligned or badged, so that we could get feedback on both of those groups. And that would later help us build a crosswalk.
Yeah. All right. So as I mentioned, step one of this process was with that original work group, looking at the rubric, looking at the directive of the chancellor, figuring out how we were going to incorporate the AI, the RSI, equity, and privacy and security. And then from there, figuring out what else do we want to change? Because as we mentioned earlier, the last revision was 2020. So since 2020, a lot of things have happened, and we've learned so much about online teaching and designing courses. So that really is what drove the conversation to what else can we do to improve this rubric experience. All right. And one of the things that we really wanted to do was to streamline the rubric as best as we could. But when you do see the rubric, you're going to notice that all of the core elements from the current rubric are still there. They still exist because they're essential to the work that we do as course designers and faculty, and really needed by our student success. We know that a course aligned to the rubric improves student success. It makes the student experience so much better. than a course that is not aligned to the rubric. So we did try to streamline. All right. So step 2 was working with that rubric pilot work group. So when we had that initial draft of the rubric, that's when we got that pilot work group together and they reviewed a course. So it was, as Marilena mentioned, one course that has never been aligned and one course that has been aligned. And we got feedback from both of those work groups. And then step 3 has been taking that pilot work group's feedback and updating that first draft of the rubric. So as I mentioned, we went through every single comment that was made from that work group, and we looked at the rubric to see how we could fine tune it, how we could make the language clearer. So that was really important work, that step 3. And that actually is the result is the new rubric. So at this point, at this stage today, we do have finalized language for the rubric. Now we're just working on other stuff, which we'll share in just a little bit. But the rubric language has been finalized by the work group based on all of the feedback that we collected.
So there are a few questions in the chat, and I don't know if we wanted to answer them now or if we, one of them was the data comparison. Frank asked that question and, oh, I see Heather may have answered that as well. Okay. And I know that individual colleges do POCR studies. And so I think that would be a really nice addition to our CVC website. Is to maybe host a page with our individualized POCR studies. Putting that in my brain notebook there. That was something to think about. Yeah. Okay, and then let's see, and then the when the CVC rubric is expected, and we're going to be answering that live. So we'll move on to this one. So we're on what does the new rubric look like? So one of the constant issues that would rise from the previous rubric was the PDF, the way it was created within a PDF, and how the PDF was not necessarily accessible, created some other problems, and many people took that rubric and redesigned it in ways that made sense for their own districts and their own purposes without changing the language of the rubric. So I think it's important to say that the rubric will be available in two, actually probably multiple versions. That it will be a Word doc, a Google Doc, a PDF. The rubric itself is not designed, the document is not designed to be a working document. It's primarily a hard copy with hyperlinks to the Canvas companion resource that we're developing now. So, and we are on 26. Where are we at? What does the new rubric look like? Yes, thank you. The new rubric, in addition to the hard copy, one of the things that I think came out of the pilot project that we did was how cool it was to use Canvas as sort of the house for the rubric itself. It offered a variety of ways to approach dialogue, tracking, other kinds of things. So the new rubric will be housed in an adoptable Canvas course. And there will be a lead POCR resource to assist to assist the POCR lead in facilitating the faculty progress throughout POCR. One of the things that this course does is it leverages Canvas discussions and the grade book, sorry. It's an interactive way to provide feedback on sections. It is also scalable. You could make private discussions. You can isolate, or you not isolate, but you can work with one faculty member one-on-one. There are also opportunities for shared discussions to establish learning communities. There's a potential to use that gradebook feature to message course authors who might be struggling in a certain area or who might need more assistance or a nudge to complete something. And so the next slide.
Oh, just before we go on, Marilena, if I can
Yes,
add.
yes, absolutely.
So I just want to say that we are going to have this adoptable Canvas course available to poker leads, to adopt and reframe and redesign as needed. That is not a requirement. If you have your own vehicle for the rubric that works for you, you can continue to use it. And as mentioned, the rubric will still be available as a Word doc, a Google Doc, and likely a PDF, but not a fillable PDF. Those documents will simply be the they'll simply house the rubric information. So then that way you can take it and you can put it in whatever format works best for you. I know that some colleges have created like Excel files that they use, like an Excel document, and that's how they, do their review. So if that works for you, that's fine. You can continue to use that. We are just creating this Canvas adaptable course to try and facilitate for those colleges that may need, something new as the way to sorry, you guys, I'm losing my words, as a way
To
to
facilitate the
thank you,
progress and to facilitate the actual review and tracking.
thank you, yes. All right.
All right, next. Okay, here we go. So I think those of you, some people may have seen what some of these retitled sections are, but the retitled sections are section 0 through section 4. Section 0 is accessibility. It's that sort of course prep function. Section 1 is specific to policies and support. Section 2 is specific to course structure. Section 3 is specific to regular and substantive interaction. And Section 4 is specific to assessments. Okay.
Oh, this is me. Okay. Okay. So, as I said earlier, the rubric the language has been finalized, and now what we're working on is additional resources for both poker leads, poker reviewers, as well as the faculty who design the courses. So we really want to make sure that when we release all of these things, it's going to be like a package where you're not just going to get the rubric, you're going to get some other resources. And right now we're working on the other resources. Now that the rubric is finalized, we're able to continue the work. So we have two digital goodies. The first is the Poker Lead resource. This is the course that Marilena talked about earlier. It's going to be the adoptable course, adoptable by your poker team, and you can reframe it, you can refine it, you can redesign it as you see fit. That resource is intended to facilitate faculty progress through the poker process. Okay, that's the first digital goodie. The second one is the Poker Companion resource site. So this is going to be a public Canvas course, and it's going to have each of the rubric elements with a larger explanation. It's actually a spin-off of what we currently have. So currently we do have a rubric, I don't know what
Course
it's called.
Design Resources course.
Yeah, the course design resources course. Um, Many of us, if not all of us, use that probably religiously, as we're designing our course and as we're reviewing courses as reviewers. So we are creating something very similar for the rubric. And what we're really trying to do is we want to make sure that that companion site is always linked to the rubric. So in the first digital goodie that we give you, you are going to see a lot of links to that companion site. When we create the Google Doc, the Word doc, and the PDF of the rubric language, we are also planning to link to the companion site. We want to make sure that when someone is looking at the rubric, they have quick access to this companion site. Because as many of you know, just reading the rubric language usually is not enough. We need more context. So that companion site will provide that context. And the third digital goodie is going to be an accessibility resource site. So we are currently working on this as well. As Maria Elena mentioned, section 0 is focused on accessibility. Now with the changes in the law with accessibility, we took that into account and reflected on how that should look like in our course design um, process and our review process. So what we've done is we've moved that to section 0 so that accessibility is front loaded. There will be a lot more details about this. That's a whole other webinar within itself, probably. But we are creating an accessibility resource companion that's going to be available for colleges to adopt. That resource companion site, it's going to be also optional. So if your college already has an accessibility process that works for you, then you can keep using that process. We're creating this for colleges that may need a little bit more support with accessibility or that haven't, truly fine-tuned that very heavy lift of accessibility. Um, I don't know if it's going to make accessibility easier, but it will at least give you a process so that both faculty, poker leads, and reviewers can follow, and will make it smoother. But as you all probably already know, accessibility is what it is. It's got to be done, and it's time consuming. Unfortunately, we can't take that away, but we're trying to just make things smoother. Okay, and more about the accessibility resource. Let me see. Oh, as I mentioned, it is going to be available for you. Um, let's see, choose your own advice. Sorry, everyone. I read through these slides earlier today.
It's about placement and where you decide or how you decide to incorporate accessibility will be, some people do all of this front-loaded work, and so they place it before moving on to review. And some people may want to incorporate that within the process itself. So there's no strict guidance on where each individual college decides, or how they decide to handle design, accessibility, cleanup, the prep work involved in making a course review ready. So that's the choose your own adventure. If you have a process, you can certainly incorporate that within this, or see how this meshes with your own process. And if you don't have a process, this would be a very good place to start.
All right. So the resource to support faculty, this is our companion site. Um, the companion site is going to take each of the rubric elements and it's going to give further explanation. It's going to give further examples. We're currently working on that right now. And this site where our goal is really to design it for everyone. We're designing it for the course author as well as the reviewer. We're really intentional about our audience, and we wanted to make sure that we were speaking to anyone involved in this process. We are embedding in almost every single element some accessibility tips. So it'll just be like, if one of the elements, like let's just say objectives, we all know that we need objectives. So the little accessibility tip will be like, when formatting your objectives, make sure to, keep accessibility in mind. And it'll give some like tips and examples on how to do that. So we have embedded accessibility within it. Let's see, address the most common barrier. So we want to make sure that we give faculty enough tools and support to make sure that as they're designing the course or as they're thinking of course design, they're thinking of alignment. Again, this is not required. This is something, these resources are going to be available to you, and your college can adopt them as needed.
Okay. Before we sort of move on a little bit to some other questions, I wanted to maybe have you stop and think for a moment about your POCR process as it is now, or if you've been involved in your local POCR process, depending on your role. So if you're a lead POCR, a POCR lead, how did you ask faculty to communicate their progress and provide updates about their course design as they aligned their course to the rubric? So that's the thing to think about. What were you doing currently, and how might these resources and these goodies be able to sort of mesh or be woven into, or maybe even at some points replace what you're currently doing? You can share in the chat if you would like. You could share what tool you used. Did you use a document? And what were some of the ways that you may have done that? Feel free to enter that into the chat and we'll do that. So, and that I think will help us as we think about this lead POCR resource, which is the adoptable Canvas course that we were mentioning earlier. And so I think it is an interactive and familiar way to communicate with your faculty. That's one of the reasons why we gravitated to using Canvas instead of a document or a fillable form, which I know at my college, that's what we had been using. The course will have modules. There will be modules specific to lead reviewer orientation. There's information about adoption notes, tutorials. There's a general welcome orientation module for faculty course authors, the benefits of POCR, covering the process. All of these sections can be customized to your own particular institution and your processes. There will be um, information that you can share with faculty, like what's in it for me? Why am I doing this? Or what benefits will I gain from this? There will be CVC rubric crosswalk information and general navigation information. I think that since we've had the benefit of the work group and all of the experiences of those individuals, we've been able to shape and think about how faculty and how POCR leads might use this resource, and then anticipate the resources and the ideas and all of the information that could go into this particular lead resource that we're developing. I'm very excited about it. I think as a lead reviewer myself, as a lead POCR lead and a lead reviewer, um, and an ID, I think that it's I think it's going to be very, very helpful for a small college like myself. Uh, and all right, so I think we can move on. So here is an example of the section intro, what it might look like. And you can see that there's a general overview, some other information. There is, let's see, 36. Okay. Can we do next slide? Thank you. The retitled sections, again, for those of you who may have missed this, they are policies and support, course structure, regular and substantive interaction, assessments, and some wrap up and next steps, which are ensuring accessibility, badging, course maintenance for continuing on, more local resources, and opportunities for you to spotlight or share examples from your course. Okay. One of the I think one of the takeaways from the pilot project was how effective the discussion format was in getting feedback and having that conversation back and forth. So we have created each section element has a discussion that could be customized. It could be assigned to a cohort or to an individual, if depending on how you wanted to structure that. So that's an example of the lead resource example. And finally, the existing course badges. So you might want to answer that. That question actually has come up a couple times for us. So let's.
I'm sorry, what question? I don't see it.
The question. Oh well, I'm talking about the next existing badge courses. So
yes. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Okay, yeah. So one question that we often get is what happens with courses that are already badged? Now we have this new rubric with some new elements, as we mentioned. What's going to happen to the courses that have a badge? So we are going to have a process and some webinars for to remediate this or to help you all keep these courses badged. So the webinar that we're going to offer is going to be titled Keep the Badge. And in that webinar, we're going to focus on what are the things that need to be added to the course so that it aligns to the current rubric. One of the things that we've talked about and that we noticed with our pilot group is that the most important thing for courses that are already badged is to ensure that they're still aligned with our current rubric. As you all know, some of our courses have had badges for many, many, many years. And if your college hasn't had a process to recheck those courses or rebadge those courses, this may be a good time to think about that. What CVC is going to do, we are going to provide guidelines on how a course can keep the badge. but then it's really up to each college to adopt those guidelines and to ensure that these things have been done for the courses that are currently batched. But we will have more information for you all. As I mentioned, we will have a webinar, probably more than one, and we will have a crosswalk so that the poker leagues can, make sure that the courses that currently have a badge keep their badges aligned with the newest rubric. Okay.
So
All right. Should I stop for questions? Well, let me go on because we're running out of
we're
time.
running out of time, but the questions that are being asked are really in that last slide. So get to that
Okay.
last slide, we're good.
Okay. What about poker reviewers who are trained? So if you're a poker reviewer, you probably know you were trained. You attended a training. Um, so what we're going to do for those reviewers that are already trained, we are going to have webinar trainings starting in July will be the first offering of that training, and then we will continue to offer it throughout the following year, basically. And in that webinar, what we're going to do is we are going to tell poker trained folks what the updates to the rubric are, what things they should be looking out for. But at the end of the day, the course review is the course review. So really the highlights are going to be those changes in the rubric.
And now for the last slide, everyone's been waiting for. When is this thing coming to you?
Okay, so this is our timeline. So the new rubric with all of the resources is they're going to be released at OTC 2026. So if you're attending OTC, we're going to have, as Liesel said, a party for the reveal of the new rubric. But at that time is when you'll have access to the new rubric and access to all of the resources. We are going to put those resources in the commons. So they will like those Canvas course resources that we mentioned, they are going to be available in the commons. But that's when the release of the new rubric will be. We're going to start with some of our webinars in July. As I mentioned, in July, we are going to have the webinar for poker trained folks so that they can be updated on their training. Then the early adoption for colleges for this rubric is next academic year, 2026 to 2027. That's what we're considering early adoption. Um, then in fall 2027, the new rubric will be in and our current rubric will be out. So that's the timeline for the rubric. Hopefully that answers everyone's questions.
There's a lot of questions about process but I don't know if we'll have enough time to answer them all. So I would encourage you to you can email your questions to Sochi or myself, and we will try to answer them. Some of your questions are very specific to your campus process. So whether you keep badges from previously badged courses, whether you keep that's an institutional decision, a local decision. So we're not going to provide guidance on, whether you should rebadge all your courses or not. That's local. And those conversations are happening sort of all over I know they're happening on my campus and my DE committee, and we're talking about this. So hopefully the timeline will have answered most people's questions. There was a question about, can you get this stuff early? And unfortunately, that will have to be a no, because we are still working and refining on this, and it's important that we do things right. So we'd like to make sure that everything's perfect for everyone when we put it out, or not perfect, but darn near. So, but it's a living document, it's a living course, things can change, and feedback is always welcome.
Right. So yeah, our goal really is to have everything as complete as we think it is. but then with feedback, I'm sure there maybe need to be changes. But as far as those processes go, we are truly trying to think of all of the possibilities so that we have answers for you. Um, so again, that release is a release of basically everything that we can think of. Um,
So
so
because we're running out of time, I wanted to make sure that Sochi and I both take this time to thank you so much for attending the webinar and to ensure that you take a moment to complete the survey, which I just dropped into the chat.
And if you have questions, more questions that you need answered, support at cvc.edu. Those questions will come to me, so I'll answer them. Um, and I want to, like as Marilena mentioned, thank everyone for being here. I want to take a moment to thank the teams that have worked on previous iterations of this rubric. It's been a long time since we've done an update, but I cannot even imagine starting this rubric from scratch. So, yay to those people that worked on that very, very difficult um, task. Because in comparison to that, this is a piece of cake, even though it hasn't been a piece of cake. But again, thank you everyone. I'm sorry if we were not able to answer your questions. But as I said, please send them my way and I'll be happy to answer as best as I can. Thank you all for your time and for your attendance. Again, the recording will be available at our CVC site, and I will be sure to include Liesel's recording, which is probably a lot better than ours. So thank you for your patience and for allowing us to stumble through this beautiful presentation that Liesel put together. Have a great week, everyone. Bye.